What's up, guys and girls? Chris Folk Podcast, episode number 73. If you're watching this on YouTube, you see me chilling in our car right now. I got the AC going. Just dropped our daughter off at preschool. It's her first time in preschool in 2 weeks. And we got a little bit of a bug, I think, from a friend of hers, man. We were at this farmer's market two Sundays ago now. And we meet up with our friends, and all of a sudden, their daughter's just like snot rocket bubbling out of her nose as she sneezed. And we're like, ooh. We hung out with them for a few hours. We're a little bit concerned, like, hey, man, this could not be a great idea here with this illness coming through. But anyhow, Emmy gets sick. I got a little bit of a cold, and you can still kind of hear it in my voice. It's been there was about one day, about 24 hours, where I actually didn't feel good at all. I was at our football practice on a Wednesday night. I'm sweating profusely. Granted, it was 95 degrees out, but something just didn't feel right. I'm just standing there coaching, and I was like pouring sweat. Then I had to work with a soccer team of a bunch of sassy 10, 11, 12-year-old females, and my patience was short, which isn't a good thing when you're working with young kids like that. And I was like, man, something's not right. The next day I was tired. I slept a lot. And, when you're sick, basically, last week I was like, hey, Steven, who I interviewed last week, the incomparable Steven Rose, right? Great helper, great person. I was like, man, I'm going to take a morning off this week. He was like, yeah, I don't blame you. You should do it. Guess what? I didn't. And I ended up getting sick. So nature has a funny way of kind of holding you, keeping you in check there when you're working too much, I think. And anyway, gets Wednesday night not feeling great. Thursday, I just laid around. Friday morning, I took off, But really, in reality here, you do all these things when you're sick. You do everything in your power to feel a little bit better. And I think to myself, why don't you just do this all the time, man? I fall victim to this. I'm not being critical of anybody, but, when you're sick, what's your focus? Your focus is on getting enough rest, maybe taking some, if you're prescribed a medication or some sort of vitamin, whatever it may be, you take your vitamins. If you're Hulk Hogan, you say your prayers. Just kidding. So, you're drinking fluids, you're getting sleep, you're taking vitamins, you're eating whatever it is that's going to make you feel good in that moment. You're not being a glutton, you're not overeating, you're not working too much, you're not consuming things you shouldn't be consuming. Your main focus is just feeling a little bit better in that moment, right? And I thought, well, this is a great strategy for life in general. I'm about 1 week into it. Let's see if I follow it. I'm already probably not getting enough sleep. And, fast forward a few months, I'll probably get another bug here. But anyhow, the only thing that's still not back is my voice is not recovering at all. So it's a weird little illness we got going on here. But so anyhow, what have I been up to, right? Last week I got my boy Steven on the podcast. The past 2 weeks here, I've been fairly busy. We're already in July, right? And I've been listening to some good stuff. I've been reading some good stuff, and I'm going to share some of that with you right now. Jordan Peterson, I'll talk about fairly often, but he had a bishop on his podcast, Bishop Aaron. This is a couple years ago now. I'm behind big time on his. And what this podcast was about is, he asked the bishop himself, where do you think the Catholic Church went wrong? The following has been dwindling over the past couple of decades, and Jordan Peterson uses religion as a great tool. The stories in the Bible, in his mind, these stories are stories that could resonate with anybody, and they're great learning tools. And he had the bishop on, and they're talking about things. And what it came down to, in their opinion, is that there was a shift here. So these guys are probably in their 50s, and they spoke relative to their generation. So, anywhere between 40 and 60. There was a shift from, in the church, say, too much mercy, not enough justice, right? And this is going to sound like, so mercy sounds like a good thing. Justice sounds like potentially a bad thing. But when we talk about justice, we're talking about what's morally right, what's just for that situation, right? And if you have too much mercy, say your kid violates one of your rules and lies to you or hits somebody, right? If you have too much mercy in that situation, if you don't squash what's wrong, if you don't tell them that what they did was wrong and that they shouldn't act that way, if you don't do that, if you give them too much mercy and you just kind of let it slide, then it's going to it's going to spiral down into things that you don't want it to spiral into. But if you treat that situation justly, if you do what is right in that moment, correct the issue, tell them that, yeah, you might have messed up, but it's going to be all right here as we move. If we learn from it, things are going to be okay. You don't say things are going to be okay. You don't just say, hey, things are going to be okay. Because what if they're not? What if you're talking to your priest, and that priest tells you things are going to be okay, but then 2 weeks later things aren't okay? Then what happens, right? We start saying things like, if you continue to work, if you continue to keep these things in mind here, things should be okay in the end here. If you keep doing right, if you keep acting justly, if you, try to make the world a little bit of a better place by the way that you treat other people. If you do these things, if you are in a church, say talking to a priest, if you act as if, all those principles that they teach you about, making it to heaven, say, if you act as if the afterlife does exist, you're probably acting in a good, positive way, right? So, too much mercy in situations here, not telling people the truth when truth is needed, okay? Letting things slide, not holding people accountable. That's what they mean by that. And I think it's an interesting thing. And as a parent here, I think that comes up a lot. If you're a strength and conditioning coach, if you're a football coach, if you're any kind of sport coach, if you let things slide, man, if you give a little bit too much leeway on certain things, you're going to make a mistake. If you let a kid pick on somebody else, if you let a kid smack somebody, do something dirty, lie to their parents, treat their mom like crap, if you let that stuff slide, if you give too much mercy in those situations, you're not helping that kid out at all. So as a coach, as a parent, as somebody that just works with other people, you need to treat people fairly and you need to treat people just. And as we talk about this thing, I just read this book, Tides of War, and Tides of War is an incredible book. Stephen Pressfield, just to give you a quick background on this book, Stephen Pressfield, he is my favorite author. I don't want to say favorite, but he's up there for sure. He wrote this book, Gates of Fire, which was about the Spartans, the 300 battle at Thermopylae, right? He's got a book called The War of Art, not The Art of War by Sun Tzu. His book is The War of Art, and it's about creating art. It's about fighting the resistance, and that resistance is anything in your life that's preventing you from reaching areas that you want to reach. For him, he's a writer. Procrastinating, all of that's the resistance. Or for other people, it might be distracting yourself, getting involved in too many things, lack of focus, whatever that resistance is. It's overcoming it, okay? This book right here called Tides of War, it's about the Peloponnesian War. We're talking about 400 BC, right? And it's crazy how long ago that was. I had to look up the dates on this because Socrates is a player in this book. And just to give you a quick background on Tides of War, and then I'm going to tie in what Socrates stood for, it kind of ties in with that mercy and justice talk that we just had. But if you're interested in Tides of War, it talks about this man, Alcibiades. So during that war, a master of politics and a charismatic lover, Alcibiades was Athens' favorite son and the city's greatest general. A prodigal follower of Socrates, he embodied both the best and the worst of the golden age of Greece. A commander on both land and sea, he led his armies to victory after victory. But like the heroes in a great Greek tragedy, he was a victim of his own pride, arrogance, excess, and ambition. Accused of crimes against the state, he was banished from his beloved Athens, only to take up arms in the service of his former enemies. For nearly 3 decades, Greece burned with war, and Alcibiades helped bring victories to both sides and ended up trusted by neither. Narrated from death row by Alcibiades' bodyguard and assassin, a man whose own love and loathing for his former commander mirrors the mixed emotions felt by all of Athens. Tides of War tells an epic saga of an extraordinary century, a war that changed history, and a complex leader who seduced a nation. So when we look at this book, we got Alcibiades, man. He's that likable guy. He's that guy that has these great qualities, and he's that guy that everybody seems to love and like, even though that there are flaws present. But eventually, this man's pride, his hubris, his whatever you want to call it, took hold, and it turned his own nation against him. So he went and he fought for the enemy. And by doing that, long story short here, he ended up making all kinds of enemies. Athens, his homeland, Sparta, who he fought with at one point, they loathed him. And then also the Persians who were involved. So if you ever saw the movie 300, Sparta and the Persians are enemies. Alcibiades came in and brokered a truce of some sort, an agreement with Sparta and the Persians. And long story short, he ended up making a lot of enemies and he perished, right? But throughout this story, you hear about his mentors, his main man, Socrates, right? And when you think about anything that Socrates is associated with, you think about this being 400 BC, right? And his teachings still kind of hold true today. But in this book, Socrates and the assassin, the man that killed Alcibiades, Polymedes, Pomo is what they called him, They're both on death row at the same time. And, Socrates drinks his hemlock. And Socrates had a choice, go into exile or be sentenced to death. And he decided that he was not going to run. He was going to speak the truth. And he spoke the truth at his court, at his hearing, and he was found guilty. And I don't want to say he didn't want to live in a world where the courts were unjust, but he just said that, if I'm treated fairly, if justice is truly brought to me, I will be acquitted of this. But he wasn't treated fairly, and he was sentenced to death. And he had the option of exile, and he said, no, I'm going to tell the truth, and I'm going to hope that justice is real. And it wasn't, right? So we could learn from that. We could learn from what the bishop said with Jordan Peterson. We got to do things that are morally just. And if we put all of our hopes, hopefully in living in a morally just society, hopefully we don't end up like our man Socrates did back in the day, as they had him drink the hemlock, which I'm not sure what that is, but it sounded like a 2+ hour process of his body slowly shutting down. And R.I.P. to Socrates, because that was the end of him. But it was interesting, man. These same things, whether it's Alcibiades as this leader, this charismatic leader who has flaws, which we still see that person today all over the world, whether it's in sports or politics or in business, whatever, that person still exists. We still have these philosophical truths that I think Socrates brought out. These things are still being worked upon as human beings here, 2,500 years later. Interesting stuff. Great book, Tides of War. It's got me going down this path where I just picked up some writings from Plato on this app Scribe that I spoke of earlier. Not today, but in previous episodes. I'm diving into this old school stuff now, man. And if it wasn't for books, books totally changed my life, I think, man. And I'm totally grateful for all these great writings, and I hope they continue to be out there, because books brought me something, that books got me interested in things that I never thought I'd be interested in. I'm reading writings from the BC era, and I'm just like, what the heck is going on here? 15-year-old Chris, if I would have talked to him at that moment about the things that I'm reading, he probably would have thought the man was out of his mind. But so be it, right? Great quote from Tides of War, by the way. Men hate nothing worse than that mirror held before them, whose reflection displays their own failure to prove worthy of themselves, right? If you weren't living your life just, virtuously, whatever it may be, right? If you're not being morally, if you're not living your life with morals, say, you have to look in that mirror and you have to face that mirror every day, right? If men don't like that reflection, if it displays failure in a certain sense, women, I assume the same, but I'm just sharing a quote from the book. If you are a person that needs a little kick in the rear end, pick up Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art, all right? Moving on. You think about, I was listening to Jacob Dylan on Joe Rogan's podcast, and all of these truths, all of these stories, all of this stuff, right? When you listen to music, man, you want to hear it. He said he likes songs. And I was talking to some kids in the gym today, and I'm listening to a Van Morrison song, and I'm asking these kids, they're like in their 20s, somewhere in high school. I'm like, hey, Van Morrison? No. Ever hear of him? No. And I'm like, man, there's this era of music, 60s, 70s, Van Morrison, a Bob Dylan, people like that, where they wrote this music with purpose. I listen to Sam Cooke. I listen to some of these Change Is Gonna Come, all of these heartfelt anthem type songs. And I'm just like, this is what I love, man. I love these music. I love music with a story, that speak a certain truth, that are trying to make the world a better place, right? And I think about that Redemption song, Bob Marley. And he says something in that song. It's like, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind, right? And when you think about that, we control everything that we're doing in our lives, right? We control the way our minds are going. You might wake up in a funk. You have two choices to make. You could compound that funk and continue to beat yourself up over something, or you could try to escape that. If somebody is, beating you down verbally, telling you all of these different things, you could let that person get in your mind and control that mind, or you could free yourself. You could emancipate yourself from that, right? This mental slavery that he speaks of, it can be self-inflicted or inflicted upon us by others. But we need to emancipate ourselves from that, right? And when I think about some of this music that I like, man, I'm listening to Bob Dylan play the harmonica and talking about Hurricane Carter, even when I was in high school and stuff, and the Redemption song when I was in high school, and I had no idea what was going on, but something in those songs, were getting me hooked. And anyhow, man, just wanted to share that with you. I love that. I love that stuff. And if you guys have some music, man, the music with a purpose, I think it's important, and I think it needs to stay, right? Speaking of emancipating yourself from some sort of mental slavery and physical slavery, I watched a little documentary called Holy Hell. And that's pretty much the perfect title for it, because it's like, you watch it and you are going, holy hell, what is going on here, man? We got this guy, turns out was involved in some crazy stuff, right? It had this feel, if you saw the Bikram documentary, it had a feel like that, man. And I'm really into the human mind, right? And how it could be influenced. I watched the stuff on, I read books on Manson. I watched stuff on David Koresh, the Branch Davidians, Scientology, Bikram, Wild Wild Country with this man named Osho. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff out there, right? And it's amazing how we fall victim to, how we can be trapped sometimes. We get caught up in these traps by these, maybe like the Alcibiades type character, that charismatic guy that gets us going and doing things. I mean, Alcibiades was a great example of somebody that could get people to do what he wants, right? And a lot of these documentaries that depict these cults, man, there's always that charismatic leader. It always starts out good, man. This, life coach type of thing, right? Always trying to help these people just find peace in their lives and, live a happy life. And then things just start to get a little bit different and a little bit weird, right? Paranoia oftentimes sets in. The group gets a little bit large. The guy's ego gets a little bit bigger. Now we're going to get some few enemies. Maybe you violate some law. You got a little pressure from the community or from the government or from the police, whatever it may be. Next thing you know, you go a little bit crazy. You seclude yourself even more. You lock yourself into stuff. I mean, and you kind of lose focus on what the initial thought was, right? But the people that join the movement, they get in it for the right reasons, in their opinion, right? They want to, they just want to become a better version of themselves, right? And I think that this man or this woman are going to take them to that place, and they didn't. And, to be honest, man, when I'm watching this stuff and I'm looking at this guy, I don't even remember his name. He's still alive. Super creepy. He's in Hawaii now, apparently. They sneak a webcam in there and they find him and they talk to him, and he was just like, his eyes are like spaced out. I don't know if he was caught off guard by it and he was acting extra weird, or if he was just his normal extra weird self. But totally creepy. And I'm watching this thing, man, and I'm just thinking to myself, something is going on with these men here. I hear the guys talking. I see this guy. I see what he's looking like, and I'm just like, man, what is going on here? Well, it turns out something was going on, and I don't know if I would recommend this documentary because it shook me up, man. It shook me up. And, I could watch a lot of stuff, but this one got me for some reason, man, and I don't know why, but whew. Holy hell. I think we watched on IMDb TV or something. But man, there's some crazy stuff out there to watch, and this was one of them. So now, not to maybe we'll try to shift the focus away from creepiness, and we'll get into we're gonna get into a little bit of fitness stuff here. Sorry about that cough right there, man. Still got a little lingering illness, guys and girls. Fitness stuff, right? I got my personal training. My life as a working out here this summer, busy schedule, right? We already established that probably every time I talk about it, but we're busy. We got to find time for exercise. It's non-negotiable, right? So you get up. I might put on the 40-pound vest and walk a mile on our trail at the farm. I'll try to sneak in some kettlebell work. Maybe I'll do 15 minutes of conditioning, all right? Some days I could do one of those a day. Other times I could do 2 or 3 of those. I could do maybe a walk in the morning, some kettlebell work, and if nobody's around, I got some time at night to do some running up our little incline. I'll run up an incline, right? I run up, walk back down, right? I sprinkle in exercise over the course of the week. I'm going to make sure I get my kettlebell work in that I need to get done. I want to make sure I'm doing a bunch of get-ups. I want to make sure that I'm walking 3 or 4 times a week with the vest on. I want to make sure I'm running. I'm doing some conditioning work, two 15-minute sessions at least a week. And I get them in whenever I can get them in. It's already Wednesday, and I've been able to check off a lot of that stuff, right? which is important, man. Front load it. When you got time, do it. Don't wait around, all right? And I was thinking about this too as we're getting this kid ready for a Kindred fitness assessment. I mean, his push-ups and his pull-ups, he needs to improve upon. So one way we could do this, and if you're basically trying to get better at anything, sprinkle this stuff in over the course of the day. Get your volume up. Volume is going to be your total number of reps. We'll go with that definition for the sake of this conversation. So let's say you could do 35 push-ups, but the number you got to get to is 50. So what are you going to do? You're going to do sets of 20, 10 times, 10 sets of 20 spread out over the course of the day. And then maybe it becomes 10 sets of 25 or 10 sets of, or 12 sets of 25, and then 15 sets of 25. You want to keep that number at a, 10 or 15, let's just say if you could do 40 push-ups, you want to do 15 less than that number so your quality of reps stays high. So you're always practicing good quality reps. This kid has to do good quality reps for his test, right? So you do less reps, but you do more sets, and you sprinkle them in throughout the day just to build up your work capacity, all right? In addition to that, say you got to improve on the pull-up. Let's say you're at 10 pull-ups, you got to do 15. Let's say you're at 0 pull-ups and you want to do 1. The concept stays the same, right? You practice a little bit throughout the day. If you need to get more, you do sets of 6. If you're a 10 pull-up guy, do sets of 6 and do 20 sets of 6, 120. Do that 3 days a week and your pull-up's going to get better. If you're at 0 or 1 rep on the pull-up or a chin-up, you put a pull-up bar in your house, and every time you walk by it, you go practice. You jump up and pull yourself up. Eventually, you're not going to have to jump so much. Let's say you can't do that. Then you go, every time you walk by it, you hang from the bar for 30 seconds. Now we're building some of those pull-up muscles, right? And then eventually you might jump and hang with your chin above the bar for 5 to 10 seconds. Eventually you build that number up to a point where you can do a jumping chin-up, and then a strict chin-up, and then a strict pull-up. But the idea is if it's something you need to work on, you need to sprinkle it in and you need to practice. And you need to practice it over and over again, right? This is not earth-shattering stuff. If you want to get better at stuff, you need to practice. And there's no better way to do it than just building that way, right? We talked about ladders in the past. Say you want to get better at, doing a bench press, right? You could do a ladder. What's a ladder? You do 1 rep, 2 reps, 3 reps, 1 rep, 2 rep, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? Do that 3 times. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. At a weight you could do 5 reps at, okay? So you're working below max. We're never really truly maxing out. Those sets of 3 will be tough, but you just keep waving. You're doing like this wave voluming where there's ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. And at the end of that workout now, you're doing 18 reps at a weight that, is pretty tough for you. That's how you get better at this stuff, right? You find a moderately heavy weight and you practice it over and over and over again. That's how you're going to get stronger. If you want to get a little bit better at walking, walk multiple times over the course of a day. If you want to get better at running, mix in some different types of running that's not going to beat you up, but you're going to have to do more of it, right? You got to be strategic about it. You got to train your energy system, your lungs, say, to improve, right? And we could do this a variety of ways. You could hold your nose. Not hold your nose. You could breathe only through your nose, right? Let's say let's say you want to feel good the next day, right? So you have 2 choices. You could go and you could do sprints and you could work really hard and your hamstrings might be sore. Or you could just breathe through your nose. You're going to run at 80% speed. Your lungs and your heart are still getting some work. But you're not running to the point where, your muscles are getting totally taxed. It's going to allow for you to recover the next day. Stuff like that. It's self-limiting, all right? A kid that I coach here, actually Steven, man, we'll probably talk about it on the next episode of the podcast. His foot, he might have a small break in his foot, and his hamstring is very tender right now. So his football season, his senior year of football starts in like a month, and he needs to condition his muscles and his lungs to be ready for the rigors of a season. But he's hurting. So what are we doing right now with him? We're doing nose-only sprints, 40-yard sprints, nose-only, and so he's running at roughly 80% speed. He's not overworking that hamstring, and he's not putting his foot in a compromised position. So he's still training. He's still, doing some squats and things like that. Hammy feels good, but we're not running at that 100% speed here where you might tweak a hammy. Now, is this risky? Once camp starts up, is he going to potentially put himself at risk for a hamstring injury? Yeah, he is, but, you could only do so much right now. If you sit idle and you go into the rigors of a season, you're going to potentially hurt yourself. because you're sitting idle, right? So you're gonna have to do something. So we're trying to keep his intensity level a little bit more moderate, where he's not feeling it in the hamstring, but he's still able to train. Hopefully those muscles get accustomed to it. You know, the accelerating and decelerating is where that hamstring, he might feel it a bit. So we're trying not to do that. We're trying to give it time to rest, and hopefully in time, it's gonna feel better. So you want to get better at stuff, we got to be able to do more of it. But you know, if it's something like sprinting, more is not always better. So that's why we changed the approach up a little bit. Maybe do some hills, maybe do some nose-only breathing, things like that, right? It's got to be smart, got to be strategic with it, right? You know, and I think it works wonders with strength stuff. And you know, the kettlebell, I just do a lot of presses: 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Depending on the week, I'm going to vary how many rungs on the ladder I do. And I just keep repeating to the point where I get a pretty good weight, and I'll end up doing 75 reps right arm, 75 reps on the left arm. And then when you get to that point, you go up weight, and then you start back at 1, 2, 3, all right? So when you do things that way, like I said, you have these waves of high volume, high intensity stuff, and also low volume, low intensity, and you just kind of work your way through it that way. And that's a good way to keep your mind fresh and your body fresh, and it's a great way to get stronger, okay? So before signing off on this, like I told you guys earlier, I'm in this old school phase, right? The man, the great Stoic Epictetus. What really frightens and dismays us is not external events themselves, but the way in which we think about them. It is not things that disturb us, but our interpretation of their significance. I had a girl in this morning, man, she was getting frustrated of things. She was doing a great box jump, but she was getting frustrated by it. It's 7 a.m., man, and she didn't sleep enough, and whatever's happening. Might not have just had her an A day. Might not have had her A game, right? Somebody else is there, a woman that's maybe around 50, and was like, oh my God, that's a great jump. Her mind, what she's doing, that mother, what that high school girl's doing was really impressive. To me, really impressive. But to the high schooler, man, she was interpreting this, you know, she was interpreting this as something negative and bad just because it felt harder, right? And I was like, you can't let that, dude. You can't do that to yourself. You can't be frustrated. You can't beat yourself up. You're up at 7 a.m. and you're putting in work and you're getting better every week. What in the world is there to be frustrated about? So, the way that we think about things, man, that is what's going to make our lives one that's a happy life or a not so happy life. All right. That's it, man. Podcast wrapped up. First episode from the car. Hopefully it was good. I'm hoping to get Steven on for the next one. We have to talk strength and conditioning, the do's and the don'ts, all right? Hope you guys like this one. Peace, everybody.